lot of acronyms. We're going to break those down and give you a definition. CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. Our housing program supervisor, Annie Gibson, is going to explain it.
CDBG stands for Community Development Block Grant. It is an annual allocation from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. You may assist households or persons up to 80% of the area median income. The City of Lakeland utilizes those funds for owner-occupied rehab, code enforcement, and public services.
Obviously, based on the decommissioning of Unit 3, we just eliminated the pricing for Unit 3 and just looked at the pricing that was offered by the various contractors for Unit 5. You'll see that we have received responses from 4 vendors. ChemTreat was actually the lowest, most responsive bidder in accordance with the bid requirements. I would point out that you'll see Buckman Laboratories as kind of an outlier with a very high bid price. I would note that one of the issues with what the discrepancy is, they miscalculated their bid. So when they submitted their bid, they did not calculate it correctly, and it was considered as is. That is why that price kind of stands out, just to draw your attention to it. Following the receipt of the responses, the vendor prices, again, the vendor prices were adjusted to only include the services for Unit 5. ChemTreat will commence their services starting in March and ending in September of 2021. The agreement contains 4 additional one-year options of renewal. The total cost for the services through end of September, $79,898, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 budget.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this something we're currently doing now?
Yes, and I believe ChemTreat is our current
existing provider
and can verify that ChemTreat has been providing these services. And this is also for equipment and chemicals, encompass all of these services as well.
Cool. The cable just got disconnected.
Oh, that's why.
The cooling tower is
Green, right?
Yes, sir.
And is it just a discharge permit, or do we just an off-site discharge, or we would
No, that's not the blowdown from the cooling towers goes to the combined sump at McIntosh, and from there it goes to Glendale and then on to the wetlands. So it's not a discharge permit involved system per se, although we do hold the chemistry to the limits at the wetlands. We monitor for that. The only other issue that this really has is just strictly treating the cooling towers, which we've been doing since the unit was put in service.
do we treat for BTAC? What do we treat for that?
It's for a combination of corrosion control and for anti-scaling, for anti-deposition.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Madden?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Reed, for bringing that up. I wish in my mind I could, have figured everything out about all of our plans and, how they, fit into the puzzle, but I have to admit I haven't. And I really am, curious about, the water, like how Commissioner Reed talked about a discharge permit. If we could have Ken Riddle, someone kind of give us a little tutorial, because I'm just, even like with regard to, decommissioning our coal plant, folks are talking about, does that reduce the amount of water that you're using to cool the coal plant and using this purchase? I'd like to know how water plays into, water permitting and water usage plays into all of our different units and plants at large, especially because, going forward, we're thinking about things like electrolyzers and creating hydrogen, and that, of course, requires water, but the water component is precious, in our area, and I really would like a little bit more information. This isn't time sensitive, but if at any point, someone could give us, and I'm one of 7. I don't know if my other colleagues would enjoy such a presentation, but how does our, Lakeland Electric utilize water, permit for water, how it changes when we decommission coal versus if we, bring in, combined cycles and, all of the different ways, versus solar versus everything. So many of my colleagues have interest in getting a little bit more information on this subject.
I think we do, and probably the best venue to do that would be in a utility committee meeting and bring the whole utility committee up at the same time as well. And then we could, use it as an educational component. City Manager Strauss, you think that'd be doable?
Absolutely, I'll be happy to sign that. Right.
Okay, thank you, sir. Commissioner Reed and Commissioner Strauss, your mic is really soft, just FYI. Commissioner Reed.
It would be interesting if we go full cycle and maybe if some of the discharge coming off the 7 wetlands, we could come back and use for our municipal water supply somehow. I know it goes into the Hillsborough River, but invariably, maybe we could siphon off some of that for our regular municipal water somehow. Just, it'd be nice to do a complete cycle.
And of course, part of that goes to TECO too, which they bring in as a portion of that discussion. The cooling towers, absolutely, the water eats up the pipes themselves if not treated, and that corrosiveness issue is a huge issue, and anything that's true in diesel engines on semis, the same kind of treatment takes place. That's my old arena. So it's very interesting to take a look at. So do you want to leave that on the consent, but a workshop for understanding the water treatment? Is that what I conclude? Okay. All right, then that takes us to number 2, item 2.
The second item that we have is an agreement with Electric Supply Inc. for an electric meter farm. This is for advanced metering infrastructure software and basically essentially creates a laboratory environment for testing for a safe place for our LE folks to try out new software and to test equipment. The meter farm would be inside a closed fenced area located at the T&D building on Parker Street. In September, the city's purchasing department issued a request for proposal. We received responses from 3 suppliers, and Electric Supply was awarded the bid based on the meeting the requirements, and they were the lowest priced bidder that submitted a proposal that met those requirements. Radian Research wasn't able to meet the city's requirements, which is why they were excluded, even though they were a lower price. The electric supply will commence services, and the construction for the meter farm is anticipated to be completed in June of 2021 at East Parker Street, and the total cost of the meter farm is $55,497, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 budget.
Yeah, is there any difficulty in leaving that on, or do you have any questions at all, commissioners? All right, we'll leave that one on. Thank you. All right, that then brings us back to the front end of the meeting, and that we have no equalization hearing or request to appear from the general public, so that takes us to public hearings, item 3B1.
Thank you. This is the next step in the process of getting the Heather Point Drive special assessment on the tax bills next November. As you recall, we approved that project and appropriation for that and an assessment back in December. This is just another procedural step that we have to take to meet the state statute in order to put this on the tax rolls. It's a $706 per lot assessment. Fortunately, 6 of the property owners chose to go ahead and pay their assessment in full. It's $706 over 10 years, and they went ahead and paid that in full. So we're down to 30 properties that will be included on the tax bill.
This is a great solution for that. Any questions on that one? We can do those at the meeting then. Next item, sir, is City Manager, 5A.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me better now? You can. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, I have 3 items for presentation this morning. The first item identified as item 5A is regarding a cooperative funding grant agreement with the Southwest Florida Water Management District for Crystal Lake Water Quality Improvement Study. The City of Lakeland has been awarded a reimbursable 50% matching cooperative funding initiative grant from SwiftMud for the Crystal Lake Water Quality Improvement Study. The proposed project consists of a feasibility study to evaluate nutrient reduction sediment treatment options to improve water quality in Crystal Lake. Crystal Lake does not meet current water quality standards and has a Florida Department of Environmental Protection mandated nutrient reduction plan. A previous study showed that sediment cycling contributes over 90% of the phosphorus load to the lake. The feasibility study will evaluate options to reduce the phosphorus flux from the sediments to improve water quality. The cooperative funding agreement between SwiftMud and the city for the Crystal Lake Water Quality Improvement Study outlines the obligations of both parties, deliverables, project schedule, and budget. The parties anticipate the total cost of the project will be $200,000. SwiftMud, through this agreement, agrees to reimburse the city for 50% of all allowable costs up to $100,000. Funding for this project is provided in the FY21 Stormwater Utility Fee budget. It should also be noted that the Polk County Parks and Natural Resources Division has agreed to continue to co-fund water quality assessment, monitoring, and restoration projects at 30% of the costs incurred via reimbursement to the City of Lakeland upon completion of the project. It is recommended that the City Commission would authorize the appropriate city officials to execute the cooperative funding agreement as presented at Monday's Commission meeting. That completes presentation.
Are there any questions, Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. I know in our TPO meeting, there's plans to do some new road from North Crystal Lake almost all the way to Highway 98 in the near future. And if we're going to do something there again, it's going to dramatically change that little intersection, Skyview intersection and Crystal Lake Drive. And there's a wetlands on the east side of Columbia Road, right in that intersection. And I really don't know how this is going to play into that because if we get this study done, all of a sudden it may be for nothing if they come back and put the road in and there's a development. They've done a lot of land clearing to the east of Crystal Lake and Skyview. If you've ridden by there, I think somebody made a reference to that a couple of weeks ago, what was going on there. But I'd hate for us to just waste money and all of a sudden we have to redo this. I'm not quite sure if they're in coordination with the county on the road network in reference to this, but I just wanted to bring that up for whatever it's worth.
Yes, sir. We do have Lori Smith on the call. Lori, do you know if the plan contemplates what Commissioner Reed has presented? Lori, I see your mic is hot, but I can't hear Lori. Can anyone else?
I would think
Lori may be having, Chuck is on the call. Chuck, do you know if that's contemplated in this project?
At this point, I don't believe that it has. One of really the only project I'm aware of in that area are improvements to Cumbie Road. DOT's in the process of finishing up its project development environmental study for a widening between North Crystal Lake Drive and US 98 that really consists of adding a middle turn lane, a couple of roundabouts within the corridor, but no new alignment in that area. So what we can do is certainly make sure the DOT project team understands, this project is out there and put the relevant parties in touch with each other. With Cumbie Road, I mean, it's kind of a good news, bad news situation. The good news is design hasn't begun yet. Construction and right-of-way acquisition is not funded at this time, but it is something that DOT is very interested in trying to move forward. But we will make sure that all the relevant parties are in touch with each other.
It would be nice if we could just maybe have a little bit of an update on that when we have our meeting on Monday, when we get to that point.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Any other questions on that? Commissioner Walker.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Commissioner Reed, I'm trying to understand, I guess, your question, because I'm hearing both water quality and transportation being subject matters. And I want to make sure that what I'm hearing and what we're asking for, is relative. So are we asking about the transportation situation and the development situation around Crystal Lake and how it may have interference or a challenge with the water quality kind of study that's going to be done? I want to make sure I'm hearing that correct.
If I may, Mayor, my question would be to make sure we have coordination between the two efforts to make sure that both people are on the same page, so we don't have to have redundancy in the future. I see Lori's come on staff now too, and maybe she could address it there again. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page, basically.
Yes, Lori, please go ahead. No, we can't hear you, but you show that you're on. Okay. But I'm going to ask a head nodding question. If we get the standards in place that this does, and then they develop something in the intersection, their responsibility would be compliance to those standards at that time, would it not? Okay, so I think we'll have future coordination in terms of protection of the lake, correct? Okay. Thank you very much. And thanks for that nods. It still works. All right, your next item.
Staff understands the point being made, by Commissioner Reed that, improvements there, as he discussed, could create additional sediments and runoff. And so we would just need to coordinate and make sure that that's contemplated. And so Lori's shaking her head, and Commissioner Reed will make sure, and also Commissioner Walker, to your question, that that's coordinated.
I think we're all sensitized by that, City Manager Strauss, due to what didn't happen at Kathleen Road in the overpass that happened to Bonnet Springs, or to Lake Bonnet, that we see us having to mitigate today. And so I appreciate that, Commissioner Reed, as we go forward. Item B, sir.
Item B is regarding 3 contracts in support of upgrading to the very well-known Category 3 instrument landing system at Lakeland Linder International Airport for the installation of the approach lighting system shelter, purchase of depot spares for the shelter, and for the relocation of a glide slope. The upgrading to a Cat 3 ILS is progressing on schedule, and the airport needs to enter into contracts with companies who are under contract with the Federal Aviation Administration to fabricate and install the building that will house the approach lighting system, purchasing of depot spares for the system, and professional services to relocate the glide slope. The first of the 3 contracts is for the building that would house the system that will be prefabricated, and the building has been specifically identified by the FAA to be used to house all its approach lighting system equipment within the southern region. The vendor under contract with the FAA is ABUC Incorporated, has provided a quote of $337,066 for its services to provide and install the required shelter, provide necessary heating and cooling equipment, fire-related walls, and wall penetrations as required. The second contract, the FAA has agreed to maintain the system once it is operational, which will release the airport from any ongoing maintenance cost. As part of the agreement, the FAA is requiring the airport to provide them with depot spares, critical replacement parts that it retains to be used for any future repairs to minimize downtime. The depot spares are to be purchased from the New Bedford Panoramics in Claremont, California, the sole source for the FAA for $161,472, including the estimated freight charges. The third contract is related to the glide slope. The glide slope is presently located within the object-free area of runway 927, which is permissible when operating under a Category 1 or 2 system. However, it is required to be located outside of the OFA when operating under what will now be the Category 3 ILS. The glide slope provides the proper path of descent for an aircraft preparing to land, indicated by a radio beam. The airport has received a quote from Thales USA ATM in the amount of $87,997 to provide the services to uninstall the glide slope from the existing location and then reinstall in the new location and support the FAA in commissioning the flight check of the system. It's recommended that the City Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to enter into the agreement with ABUC in the amount of $337,066 to provide and install the system shelter subject to the Florida Department of Transportation approvals. It will also be recommended that the Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to place the order to purchase the additional depot spares as described and required by the FAA in the amount of $161,472. And then finally, it's recommended that the Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to enter into an agreement with Thales USA in the amount of $87,997 to provide the professional services related to the relocation of the glide slope and subject to the Florida Department of Transportation approvals, and there will be no appropriations that will be required to support this request. That completes presentation.
Thank you. I have an initial and it's an educational question for our airport director, Gene Conrad, who is on the moving of the glide scope outside the object-free area. Why is there a differentiation between a Cat 3 and Cat 4? A Cat 2 and a Cat 3, I'm sorry.
Well, the Cat 2, it's just the precision of the approach. So as we go to Cat 3, essentially these aircraft will be able to land themselves in 0-0 visibility. And it's that critical, and the precision approach is again, is that critical. They have to make sure that obviously other objects aren't in a certain space. So right now it's within, if you know our runway, obviously 927, and then we have a southern taxiway over there by Sun and Fun. Right now it's in between the runway and the taxiway. With this move, it'll move the glide slope outside the taxiway and get it about 400 feet away from the runway, which is required.
Understood. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Other questions by commissioners? Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Gene, what else is left? What other steps after these activities in completing the upgrade?
Well, I believe we have another item that's in regards to the upgrade. And then there's one more piece, which will be the contract, which hopefully we'll bring to you next time, which will be the installation of the ALSEF and all of the parts, for the new glide, for the new Cat 3 system. So that'll be a large contract. That'll be several millions of dollars that will be coming to you, and that will essentially be the last piece.
And that makes it operable in November-ish, is that correct?
Yeah, so right now we're on schedule and we're pushing hard. We have a flight check in October. And then once that flight check occurs, then it's certified, it's ready to go, and then we'll be able to hit our November date. So there's just so many pieces that we have to, keep moving down and take, checking off the timeline to make that date. And I will tell you, this is a super aggressive schedule. I will tell you, Amazon is very impressed because they have not been able to accomplish getting something like this put in place as fast as we are. And just a real quick kudos to Adam Lund, my operations manager, because he's been running this project for us for several years now, and he's done a great job.
Thank you, Adam, very much. Any other questions? Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Yesterday at the TPO meeting, I saw quite a bit of information from the in reference to the Render Airport, and I guess that's part of that same deal coming down, Gene, because it's like $3.1 million for one particular project, wasn't it?
Well, we have a bunch of projects that are in the work program with FDOT and FAA. So to be honest, I don't know which project that is. But I will tell you, for specifically with the Cat 3, we have outer year reimbursable monies that are coming for the project. So it's an 80-20 grant. It's going to be in the $18 million range, but there are outer year reimbursements that will come to us. So each year we're getting, pots of money that are coming to us to make up for the state's 80% participation in this program. But that number is also changing as well. It's all dependent on, obviously, we're all dealing with the pandemic, but it's also how the budget's going to fall out this year and how much money will be available in the aviation program. But this is a priority project for the state and for our district. So they will continue to fund it and make sure we get what we need as far as what they committed to.
I think most of those projects are stated to be completed by 2024. Is that about right?
Again, there are several projects in our work program. I will tell you the next two projects we have are Taxiway Echo and Taxiway Papa that will be coming this next agenda as well. So again, we have several projects, and I couldn't tell you which one specifically it is.
Thank you.
Certainly beyond the parallel runway project we have in terms of utilization, sophistication, and attraction for airlines to Lakeland, this Cat 3 is probably the most significant thing that we can be accomplishing, isn't it?
Yes, sir. We will not upgrade this again. We are done. There's nothing else to upgrade to. This is it.
Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you so much for your leadership in that, and Adam again for his acceleration in that process. That brings us back to our city manager, Rouse.
Item C, the third item, is regarding an award of bid number 1020 to Aviation Construction and Electric, and for a contract amendment with Atkins North America for construction oversight of the airfield lighting upgrades for phase 2 of the ILS Cat 3 project at the airport. The airport is upgrading its existing ILS system to a Category 3, as we have discussed, to be completed by November 1st, 2021. The airport updated the commission on February 1st that the design for the Category 3 project has been separated into 3 phases, and this kind of speaks to Commissioner McLeod's question. The airport received approvals to proceed with phase 1, and the airport is now ready to commence phase 2, upgrading the runway 927 airfield lighting. The airfield lighting upgrade work was advertised under bid number 1020, with 4 companies responding to the bid. The airport's engineering firm, Atkins North America, along with airport staff, reviewed all 4 bid responses. The low bidder, Aviation Construction and Electric, was determined to be the lowest and most responsive bidder, with a bid of $1,974,590.20. Atkins North America will provide the construction administration services for phase 2 of the project for a not to exceed amount of $321,755 under an amendment to their existing contracts. Award of the bid and amendment of the contract will be recommended at the City Commission meeting as presented. No appropriations will be required for the request. That completes presentation.
Any questions by commissioners? All right. We'll look forward to that on Monday. That brings us back to City Attorney and first reading, item 6A.
Thank you. 6A is an amendment to the city's retiree health savings plan. You probably know that we changed vendors for the pension plan for the deferred comp plan from TIAA to Voya. And we had an opportunity to go with Voya as well with our retiree health care plan, same investment options. And as I'm speaking, hopefully Sherry Watson is pulling up a presentation that she has. Just briefly go over this. I'm looking for Sherry here. Sherry?
And Kevin, you're going to need to share a screen with Sherry.
Yes.
If she has the presentation.
And I do have the presentation up. Good morning.
Good morning. We do not see it yet on a shared basis.
I'm looking for her in the long list here. Just found her.
while we were waiting, Sherry, thank you for your work on this.
Yes, sir. Can everyone see it?
Yes, we now see it.
Okay. So what I wanted to do was just kind of give an overview, if you have just a couple of minutes for me. What we're trying to do is switch out. We currently have a company called ICMA, and they've been here since 2003. In the beginning, the city paid a lot of our retirees' insurance. And what has happened is over the years, it became very costly. So in 2003, they began a plan where if you were here hired prior to January 1st of 2003, the city would pay you $5 per every year of service, and you would receive that in retirement to help offset insurance costs. If you were hired after January 1st of 2003, the city implemented a 0.5% debit out of each paycheck to go into this plan. It goes in pre-tax. When you leave the city, that becomes your account. If you retire from the city, we actually kind of go over ways that you can get reimbursed for medical expenses, including your insurance premiums when you retire. With that being said, ICMA has been the company ever since 2003. When we did send out an RFP for our 457 and Voya won that bid, they also were participating in retiree health savings accounts. So we went ahead and did an RFP to study what companies are out there that offer the RHS for our employees. With Voya, they offered us an open architect for investing, and they would let us piggyback on the deferred comp investments that we have. In the deferred comp investments, we do hire an outside investment consultant to watch those funds for us. We do pay them a fee, of course. With this account, if we can piggyback on that, we don't have that fee that we have to pay. Of course, there's a fee inside the mutual funds, but we don't have to pay for the investment advisor to oversee these investments any longer. And I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Kevin, how do I minimize that so I can go to the next page? It's blocking that section.
Go to the very far right icon at the bottom. Far
there
right.
It is. There we go. So what we're trying to do today is we're just recommending a vendor change from ICMA Vantage Care. ICMA is the actual main company. When you retire, you go through Vantage Care. It's a third-party vendor that ICMA works with in order for us to get reimbursed. It's the same thing with Voya. Voya actually will go through TASC, TASC, and they will reimburse those medical costs. So what I wanted to do was kind of just give you an overview of those. It's for our retirement. It is in post-employment, so you cannot touch it while you are employed. Those contributions come in the 0.5%. They come in pre-tax. So when they are reimbursed to you, they are never taxed. So that is a bucket of money that we do not have to pay taxes. It's an IRS regulation, and we do follow IRS guidelines. This account is mandatory for every new hire that comes on board after January 1st of 2003. There is no way to increase your contributions or decrease them. They are set. Okay, so here's where it talks about being vested. You're 100% vested. Every bit of the money that you put in, you are fully vested. So that is your money to take with you once you are no longer working at the city. They are non-taxable. They're not subject to any federal income taxes. They are available for any out-of-pocket medical expenses that you have, whether it's prescriptions, if you go for deductible, anything to that nature. You are also allowed to have your beneficiaries as your tax dependent, meaning that if you file for them as a dependent on your tax return, they are dependent and you are allowed to list them as a beneficiary, meaning that if something happened to you, that account would then go to your beneficiaries that you have listed, but they do have to be a dependent, meaning if it's a child under the age of 26, or if you have a dependent that's living with you in your home and you still claim them. Spouses, of course, are always on there. it takes it a second to go to the next screen. So here we go. So what's happening is typically we are paying $25 on an annual fee. Voya is lowering that fee to $22.80 annually. One of the positive things that they're doing is not only will you have one log on now to see your deferred comp account and your retiree health savings account, but Voya will offer us a debit card. Right now, ICMA, we have to fax them receipts, and then they reimburse you based upon those medical receipts. When we switch to Voya, they're going to issue a debit card. So that way you can just give the debit card to any doctors, or you can pay for your prescriptions by using this debit card. That's one of the other things that we really liked about it. And like I said before, it is an open architect, so they're going to let us piggyback on the same funds that are in our deferred comp account, meaning that they can grow a little bit larger. Currently, the funds in ICMA are their proprietary funds, so the fees on those funds are a little bit higher. Okay. When they first did this account in 2003, they did require to get a letter from the IRS certifying that they follow federal regulations, which they did receive back in 2003. The plan has been reviewed by our finance department. Mike Brozart works with me on this account as well. Hopefully the city manager's office is familiar with this account. I know it's a small account. There's only about $5 million in this account. I have presented at the Employees Association recently to let them know that we're working on these changes as well. There's no cost to the city other than providing any payroll deductions and plan-related administrative and accounting expenses. Mainly it's for the employees just to have a little bit of a retirement account to have for any medical expenses once they leave. Okay, so we're just recommending that the commission approve the adoption and implementation for us to move over to Voya from ICMA. The account is current, but we just want to change vendors on it. It's been since 2003. In 2009, it was modified a little bit, but we still stayed with ICMA. And Voya, we did an RFP. ICMA was there as well as Voya. We had a panel. It was myself, Mike Brozart, and Jeff Stearns in finance. And Voya did have the best presentation with the benefits for each of the employees.
We're certainly glad you were part of that group. Okay, are there any questions by commissioners on this? Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just wanted to make sure, now, this is the first reading, so, but have we shared this information with the retirees as in that particular group at this point yet, Ms. Sherry?
What we do is, this is so much easier for our retirees. Currently, how we counsel them is a lot of them just come back in and we help them because they have to have receipts. We tell them just to save them for about 6 months. Then when they come into us, we fill out a form, we fax it over for them, and they get their credit back. We are working with every one of our retirees. Remember, a long time ago, those retirees wouldn't have this account. They get the $5 per year of service. This is only for retirees that have retired since January 2003 that had this account. So remember, prior to 2003, they get the $5 per year of service. So we do counsel them. The ones that are recently retiring from the end of last year to current, we are actually letting them know that we are going to be doing a conversion and that they will have a debit card because a lot of people are moving out of town. So we let them know so it's a little bit easier for them. But we are here to help them, and we do let them know no matter what question they have in retirement, we're here to help our retirees.
So if I hear you correct, then again, we are contact and communication with them is being shared as best to inform of what this particular situation would be. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Well, I'm assuming that when do we anticipate this taking place?
Well, we've been working on the documents, so we kind of got pushed back a little bit from the agenda study because we've been working on the documents. There's 5 documents in place that Palmer's been working on with me. We wanted it to be effective March 1st. I did explain to them that we may not be able to have it effective March 1st in case you guys have any questions. But as far as we know, the documents are dated March 1st.
And we're going to circumvent the Murphy Group in Orlando from, they won't be involved anymore of looking over the insurance component.
We have asked for liability from Task, which is the third-party vendor, and Voya is already currently our 457 provider and already has provided the fiduciary side of the insurance. So maybe I'm not understanding exactly who the Murphy Group is.
I think it's the Murphy Group. I know we hire a consultant from Orlando. We pay like $80,000 a year to look over the different policies that we before we sign them.
That's with respect to other insurances for property.
Is that right?
Yeah, I believe. Correct.
And we'll get the employees will get a better health benefits. They're just cheaper.
No, sir, it's not for that. What this is for is a reimbursement of medical costs in retirement. So it's totally different. It doesn't help their insurance or anything like that. It's just a way to get reimbursed pre-tax money, though, to where it's never taxed. How we do this with our actual retirees that keep the city's insurance is we get a letter from our risk department saying how much their premiums will be in retirement. We actually fax that letter to the current company, which we will also do to Task, the new company, and they automatically set up a reimbursement for their insurance premiums on a monthly basis, and that goes right back into their checking account. So we're really trying to alleviate receipts is our main thing, because a lot of us, we don't keep receipts. So we're really trying to make it easy in retirement. And that's one of the suggestions that we're offering to every retiree that comes in here, and Risk works with us, and we are getting those letters from them if they keep the city insurance.
Thank you.
Any other comments by commissioners? It looks like a wonderful solution, so we'll look forward to that first reading. And that brings us to 6B1. Thank you, Sherry, very much for being here, vacating the public utility easement.
Yes, what this is doing is the city is vacating a public utilities, but it has on the Lakeland Central Park property that you have heard about fairly recently, north of the Parkway, west of Airport Road, south of Old Tampa Highway. That development is being required to donate a conservation easement to SwiftMud as part of their development approval. And SwiftMud is requiring that we vacate our public utility easement on that property. We've checked with all the different utility providers, and none of them have any objections to the vacation. So this is simply clearing the way for the developer of this property to donate a conservation easement to SwiftMud.
Any questions by commissioners or comments? Okay, next item, sir.
All right, the next item is related to the planned roundabout at Don Emerson Drive and Drainfield Road out by the airport. The DOT, when they are going to do a project like this, does a title work and determines what the interests are, and the city has a public utility easement out at this location as well. And the DOT requires that we subordinate our easement interests when they have a project moving forward. So that's what's going on here. Under the subordination agreement with the DOT, we agree that our facilities can be relocated. The DOT agrees to pay the cost of that relocation if necessary. So the city will be held harmless for any utility relocations related to this, but this is part of the process of developing that roundabout.
And that's all normal and standard?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, any questions by commissioners? Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, City Attorney Davis. Could you, I just, was thinking about, kind of our dig once policy and how we have our fiber, because when we move utilities, things like that, we incorporate that. Do you know, like and I know the city of Winter Haven is very aggressive with working with DOT anytime they do any kind of expansion or moving of utilities that they incorporate fiber. Do you know if we have fiber out there in this area?
I do not know that.
I'd just be curious, because we're working on that with Summit right now, just to know where all of our assets are and things like that, and just the cost of augmentation. And so anytime if DOT does that, in tandem with the city of Winter Haven, I'm hoping that, we do that as well with their dig once policy.
I can check with people who will know the answer to that and get back with you on Monday.
Great, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Great point, Commissioner. Any other comments? All right. That brings us then to C1, correct? Yes. Miscellaneous item report.
C1 was a consent item that we discussed at the beginning of the meeting on acquisition services for Medell Road water.
I so thoroughly marked it off mine that it looked like it was not on consent anymore, and so I apologize. Number 2.
C2 is our standard use agreement that we enter into with Sun and Fun each year. It's fortunately looking like that is going to happen this year. I believe it's April 13th through 18th of this year. The main purpose of this is quite frankly to have Sun and Fun indemnify the city and provide insurance for any incidents that might happen. They've agreed to provide general liability insurance of $1 million per occurrence, umbrella liability above and beyond that of $5 million, and then they also provide a fire and casualty policy that will cover 90% of the replacement costs of any of our buildings or structures out there that happen to be damaged by fire or other casualty. I think the other main component of this is that Sun and Fun agrees to pay for the additional costs of air traffic controllers for their events. I see Gene on the line, so Gene, you can supplement anything that I missed.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Gene, what impact, if any, will the Amazon flight schedule have on Sun and Fun air traffic?
While he is working on that, they're subordinated to the activities. In other words, they made an agreement to schedule around. Are you on, Gene?
So there are a couple things in Amazon's lease. One of the big items is when we have a military jet demonstration team like the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds, and this year it's going to be the Blue Angels. Their facility sits inside the aerobatic box, so they've agreed to up to 3 hours per day when the jet team is here to vacate that building. And the other piece is when we're running, obviously we have tons of arrivals in the morning, but basically between 7 a.m. and noon, I don't believe, based on the schedule that I've seen, that we have any arrivals at that point. So as far as the arrivals and people to be able to get in here en masse, we're going to be able to do that. And then there's some departures at 2 o'clock, but we'll run that during the air show. So we'll handle those aircraft really no different than we would if a U.S. Air Force C-17 is coming in or a business jet is coming in. It just gets worked into the show with the rest of the traffic. So it'll be accommodated along with all the other people that are visiting.
Yeah, it would probably be an unfair advertising advantage to have the Blue Angels landing one of the prime jets on either side. Other questions with respect to this? Commissioner.
I'm off a lot of questions today. I apologize for that. This is for Palmer. There again, I represent the city on the board of directors for Sun and Fun. Is this something that I would have to excuse myself from voting, or what's protocol for that?
You're on the Sun and Fun board of directors?
Well, just representing the city, yes.
No, then you would not have to recuse yourself.
Yeah, because he's appointed by us. By the way, this represents our first real restoration of a major event activity in the city as we go forward. And we're all hoping that we continue to see the reducing results that help to make that possible. And I applaud Sun and Fun for being aggressive enough to move into this schedule. And it is a primarily outdoor activity also as well. And so I know there can be some tension on this from people one way or the other, but as we restore activities going into summer, this is probably going to be our first real test of how to do that well.
And that's, if you don't mind, Mayor, that's a great point. We kind of, with the Holiday Flying Festival we had back in early December, it was kind of a dry run too as well, obviously with dealing with the pandemic, whether, having Amazon here and incorporating all those elements and everything that's going on. And that was a very successful event. And I will tell you too, specifically for Sun and Fun, it is critical that they have this event this year. Obviously they weren't allowed to have the event last year, but it's critical that they have it this year and able to keep the organization moving forward.
Yes, it's hard to believe that it was only a year ago that they were coming into our commission meeting, if you remember, in that agenda study and talking about the plans when Lights was there and maybe was putting it off 2 weeks. Just think of that. And trying to find another window of time. And that's only a year ago, because that seems to me like about 5 years ago. I don't know about you. Okay, any other comments?
And one more thing, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, you know, and the FAA, they are committed to be here to run our tower during the event, which is very, very important. It's very critical to the operation. And so we thank them for that, because if they weren't coming, it would be very difficult for us to put on this event and handle the influx of aircraft that come and go each day. So they are committed to be here. We're going to have special protocols. They will have special protocols as far as their folks. And then also we'll be cleaning the tower each night, level 3 cleaning with our great facility folks here with the city of Lakeland to make sure that tower is ready to go every day. God forbid there's an outbreak or something like that. There are protocols and a process in place to continue on with the event and make sure we have a, you know, very vibrant and safe event as we move forward.
Thank you for protecting those standards and safety. Commissioner Selvage.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought I saw something recently about the Senate Fund having the annual mayor's breakfast. Is that going to be a full attended event?
It's going to be distanced, you know, at the tables, but yes, it's going to be put back into place this year.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? So it's exciting. It's a corner turn, hopefully, and as we look at this going forward. All right, the next item, item 3.
The next item is an amendment to the city's CDBG home action plan to account for the fact that the city has been awarded additional CARES Act funding in the amount of $787,276. Annie, do you want to address this one?
Welcome, Annie.
Good morning. So this goes back to the CARES Act that was signed, of course, in March of last year. This is HUD's third round. And of course, the city was awarded $787,000. So what housing has done is outline for you the uses of those funds with, of course, additional money for emergency rental assistance, some mortgage assistance, some public services, and staff time. We did with the public services. We met with our emergency manager and staff. And HUD is recommending that we concentrate on, of course, the foreclosure associated with our rental assistance, and also with the vaccine distribution. So those agencies who were allocated or awarded funds will be concentrating on those responses to the virus.
Questions by commissioners. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Annie, not, I guess, particularly to this particular action, how well or how well did we not, or how well we did or did not do? Because I know the last time I can recall hearing a report on the dollars that we did receive for rental assistance and those kind of things, you know, we had not even utilized a great deal of those funds. As the time period ended, how do we sit with that situation?
So the state awarded some relief funds that had to be expended by December 30th. So those funds were spent. So we did spend those funds on rental assistance and mortgage assistance. So those are all gone. We were probably $1.3 million for the rental assistance. We've spent approximately $1 million. So we have about $300,000 remaining on the books in addition to the $260,000 for the CV3. But we do have a waiting list for folks who are needing assistance.
And if I may ask, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Annie, were there some dollars too allocated for utility assistance, that kind of thing as well, during the onset of the particular CARES money that we were getting. Am I thinking correct here?
With the rental and the mortgage assistance, we were able to assist with utilities, with like the electric and with TICO along those lines.
So it was all part of the one pot?
Yes, sir, it was.
And we still have another 300,000 still left, if I heard you correct.
You have about 300,000, and probably coming up in the next month. Of course, the county was awarded $21 million from the Department of Treasury.
Yes.
Lakeland probably will be allocated some of those funds also.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Reed, and then City Manager Terrell.
Thank you. Ms. Gibson, thanks for being here today. It's ironic, yesterday on the Lakeland Now website, there was an announcement that on 811 and 840 West Lemon Street, they're converting a mobile home park for homelessness group from the CARES Act. I guess the county just awarded the group $1 million. They acquired this little place down there. It's a bunch of little, I call them junky mobile homes, but anyway, it's a place for them to live, and right across the street from I think Shoot Straight, to give you an idea where it's at. Or excuse me, I'm not sure. Williams, or what if you familiar? I'm not sure if our zoning. I was going to check with Teresa today to find out about the zoning and stuff of that, to make sure they can do what they want to do.
But those funds were from, I believe, the Polk County Emergency Shelter, and they were awarded. Gospel Inc. was awarded $1 million for that location, I believe.
Okay.
So those are not funds. Those are Polk County funds.
Teresa, I see Teresa came online here. Does that comply with their zoning and what they want to do there?
Yes, Commissioner, it does. We have been in communication with Gospel Inc., both with Brian Seeley and with their board of directors, and advising them on how they can repurpose the mobile homes for this specific grant. And long-term, they are looking at transitioning it away from, COVID response housing to just general housing for the homeless population. So there may be some future zoning changes that they will need to go through, but for this grant purpose, they are able to utilize those existing mobile homes and the cottages on the property.
Will they have to bring in new mobile? I guess they have to bring in new houses because the old ones are quite old and dilapidated, from my understanding. What I've seen anyway.
Right. So the current plan is for them just to renovate the existing mobile homes and structures on the property. Long term, there's some vacant property on the western edge of that mobile home park that has multifamily zoning. And on that property, they do plan to bring in new structures, and they're looking at different options, some creative ideas in terms of some smaller homes. So again, we're working with them through that. And for the portion that has the mobile home park, they may need to come forward in the future and do a zoning change in order to allow for additional units to be brought in. But they're aware of what the requirements are and what's needed in the future.
So that may be our first tiny home community facilities.
It could be, very well, yes.
All right, City Manager Strauss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay still? Okay, great.
Yes.
I just want to take a moment to thank and congratulate Ms. Gibson and her staff. This additional money that has been awarded by HUD is a direct reflection of the exceptional job that they did managing those first allocations. And so great for the community, and it's a direct reflection of Ms. Gibson and staff that worked on managing those funds. Thanks.
Thank you for your always conscientiousness, ma'am. Any other comments by Commissioner McLeod?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Annie. I just wanted to ask you to comment on the process for choosing the organizations providing public services. It sounds like that was pretty thorough and it was a comprehensive review committee, but can you just comment on that?
Well, what we did was we sent an RFP to over 100 nonprofits. And with that in mind, we did get 16 responses. For a quick return, what we did was, of course, we
We employed our community development housing staff, and of course, Ms. Kane to, of course, review those applications. So with the advice from HUD, they pretty much said some of the best practices were, of course, we needed to get that vaccine out for distribution-wise to the community. And we also needed to respond to the foreclosure problem that we're having with folks who are being evicted. So those were some of the best practices. Then we got that advice from our HUD rep. And one thing that I did not want to summarize for is that on our rental program, we were at a maximum of 3 months of rental assistance or $5,000. We're looking at increasing that to 6 months because we were seeing some folks who are in need of it for 6 months. They are verified and they have to be late on their rent before we are awarding money to landlords. So we are verifying they are late, and we are verifying the amount owed with the landlords.
Good question, sir. Thank you. Any other comments? All right, then having done that, we are to item 5, C5.
Yes, I apologize for this getting to you so late yesterday afternoon. There is a development prospect for this property. I don't know if Teresa can pull up the slide to show exactly where this is. You've seen this a number of times. We're on our 7th Amendment. You can see our exhibit's getting a little bit dingy looking there, so we might have to refresh that. But the city owns that triangular shaped property in the middle of those roads there, about 3 acres. And just to the south of Old Kathleen Road is the old Fort Natal site, which Lake Wire Development Company owns. That's David Bunch and Bill Tinsley are the principals of that. And it's closely associated with the Bonnet Springs Park development just to the west of George Jenkins Boulevard. They are in discussions with a proposed developer of both the Fort Natal site and the city's parcel for a multi-use development. And so we are trying to help facilitate things and keep the momentum going. So we added this to the agenda late yesterday afternoon. This amendment does 3 things. I'll hit the 2 easier ones first. The city just acquired Old Kathleen Road recently, in the last couple of months, I guess, from the DOT. And as part of that, the DOT also deeded to the city a strip. And Teresa, if you can advance the slide to the next one. There's a strip that runs along the western side of the city's parcel along George Jenkins Boulevard. You can, not a great exhibit, but you can see Old Kathleen Road down there at the bottom. And then there's about a 12-foot wide strip that's kind of in bold outline there that runs along the retaining wall for George Jenkins Boulevard that the DOT conveyed to the city as well as part of that transaction. So this amendment, 7th Amendment, adds that 12-foot strip to the list of property that the city will be deeding to Lake Wire Development Company when we get to the closing of the property. A second thing that it does is, the contract we have with Lake Wire Development calls for Old Kathleen Road to be vacated eventually, and it's ultimately going to be incorporated into whatever goes into this property. When we vacate it, per the typical process, half of the property will go to the property owner to the south, which is Lake Wire Development, and half will go to the property owner to the north, which is the city. So when that happens, we need to make sure that both property owners have access to that road, as well as any utilities in that right of way. So this is granting cross access easements and cross utility easements for the 2 parties there. The main amendment, though, is also related to a provision in the current agreement that says that before the city has an obligation to close on its 3-acre parcel to the north, the city commission has the right to review whatever development is going in there and analyze, the compatibility. What does it think that? What are the chances of success of the development? what potential property tax revenues would be generated by that development. And Lake Water Development, David Bunch and their attorney Chris Fear have indicated to us that is causing complications in their negotiations with the proposed developer of the property. They are working on developing plans for the Old Fort Tile site, yet they have this uncertainty with regard to whether they can also develop the city's parcel. So they have requested that that condition of closing be removed from our purchase and sale agreements for the city's parcel. And the city staff has countered that, okay, we can live with that, but what we would like to do in its place is develop a list of properties that would not be allowed on the city's property, even though they might otherwise be allowed by the C6 zoning on that property. So this amendment has a list attached to the end of it, which shows the different uses that would be permitted by the C6 zoning, but that the city does not want to see go on this property nonetheless. So those are the three main things that this amendment is doing. David Bunch and Chris Fear are on this go-to meeting, and they can expand on that if you have questions or want a little bit more information about some of those issues.
And if I could add one thing, it also does not prohibit the normal process in community development that would take place. So we're not forfeiting design issues and reviews that would take place. It really is for the acquirer just trying to take out a level of complication where they can't anticipate what might happen and not have it be as normal and typical as it would be if they were normally working through community development. Is that correct, City Attorney Davis?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, this would still be subject to the standard processes otherwise in place for any other property.
So are there any roundouts that either Chris Fear or David Bunch would like to make to the commission, or would the commission like to ask them any questions? Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question is not particularly to this particular piece of property, but another piece that maybe either Mr. Bunch, Mr. Fear may not be able to answer, but Mr. Bunch may be able to answer if he's on. If I don't see him, so.
He's here, and he'll.
I'm here by phone. Okay, I'm in favor of what we're doing moving forward with this particular agenda item. But Mrs. Bunch, you have any knowledge as to what is happening with the old Club Kathleen property that I see is being some work being done there? Is there having some folk have asked me, is that the BSP people doing that? I can't answer because I'm not part of BSP, kind of a organization somewhat. But I told them that, I think we easily can find out. Do you have any knowledge of that at all?
No, I do not. That's a property of great interest to everyone. You and Bonnet Springs Park and this property, it's got a checkered history. So I know there are people who live in that area who are concerned, and we are concerned about that, working with that entire neighborhood, incidentally, to do whatever they would like to see happen to their neighborhood. But no, I don't. That is owned by a number of entities, and it's been rather difficult to communicate with. I haven't made an overt effort to follow up on that piece of property simply from a time standpoint, but do not know what's going on. No, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But while I have that subject out there, is there any way, Mr. Rouse, because there's work being done on that property, is there any way we can find out through our permitting situation to see who may be doing something, or the work that's being done has been even permitted to be done, those kind of things?
Sure. Well, I'll check and see if there's been any permitting or interaction with staff and can report back.
Okay, if you could, I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. David, first of all, I'd like to commend you here and Bill. I see a lot of construction going on at Bonnet Springs. Looks like they're making tremendous headway. I can't wait for it to open. Matter of fact, I need to get with you guys. I need to buy a bench between you and I. Been meaning to do that. Of course, obviously, we have to do. There have to be some mutual trust as to what you're going to put on that site. I guess y'all have an option to buy it as kind of an open-end deal for a long time. Palmer, I haven't had a chance to read it. What are the three items what are the property types that will not be allowed on that particular corner?
Okay, well, first of all, the C6 category has a list of prohibited uses that would be prohibited on any property, so those continue to be prohibited. It also has a list of conditional uses that require a public hearing process before moving forward. So any conditional use in the C6 area would still require an additional public hearing process before moving forward. So what this list does is at the very end of this agenda item is take uses that would otherwise be permitted on this property, but that we do not want to see go on this particular property, and list those out, and they'll be in a deed restriction once Lakewire Development sells the whole property to the eventual developer of the property. But the list of uses that are prohibited that would otherwise be permitted are bed and breakfast operations, repair-oriented services, medical marijuana dispensing facilities, catering establishments. At least if that's the principal use, we recognize that restaurants oftentimes have a catering component to that, and this does not prohibit that. But if it's a standalone catering business, that would be prohibited. Churches, synagogues, other houses of worship, colleges, junior colleges, universities, seminaries, daycare center accessory to a house of worship, daycare centers for adults, daycare centers for children, vocational trained facilities, group homes, hospitals and emergency rooms, broadcast and transmission towers atop buildings greater than 50 feet in height, communication studios, and then utility type facilities. And I should add that this is a little bit of a fluid situation. I feel Chris is staring on me here. They're still working with the developer on this list, but we just wanted to capitalize on the momentum, so we went ahead and put this on the agenda and moved forward. The list may be tweaked between now and Monday, or we may need a little bit more time, but we thought it would be better to go ahead and get this on the agenda and get something approved if it was at all possible.
Is this something we would have to have like a first reading, second reading, or just going to be voted on Monday?
It would just be voted on Monday.
I'm not particularly interested in having a big gas station on that corner either myself, but I don't know what the other people are. Again, a big gas station, I don't think we need one of those right in the core of our city either. So I'd like to put that on the list between, I don't know how fellow commissioners are, but I'm not in favor of a big 10 island Wawa or something like that.
And I should add that just because something's not on this list doesn't mean it's not prohibited. I mean, this is only listing uses that would otherwise be permitted that we're prohibiting for this particular property. I don't know if Teresa can address the gas station issue, whether that's a permitted use in the C6 area or not.
I'd like as a non-permitted use personally.
So motor vehicle fuel sales are not a permitted use within C6. So what this list started with is everything that was permitted by right within C6, and then made exclusions from that list. So that would not be an allowable use.
Thank you.
Commissioner Madden and McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to hear from Mr. Fear with regard to this list. I don't know how we came up with the list of prohibited uses, but is there anything that gives you pause, Mr. Fear?
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you, City Commissioners and Mr. Mayor. We have only recently seen this list. The list at one point was a lot longer. It has been pared down. We have communicated this list to the prospective purchaser. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay? And they are still digesting. They are not a Florida developer. They have developed in Florida. So they are digesting what's in that list. They are certainly going to want to go through the land development code and see what those specific items mean. They're just, 3 or 4 words. What does that mean? And so they have not been able to say they're 100% comfortable with what's on that list. We would prefer not to have anything on the list, but we recognize that, there are things that are important that the city would not want to have on that list that are currently permitted. But again, we are continuing to have discussions with the prospective purchaser to try to get them comfortable with the list. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, I would just comment, to my colleagues, and they may differ, but I really believe that, when we talk to our community development department and when we, come up with extra layers of regulation or prohibitions, that give, I think what developers are looking for is certainty, and they want to know what they can do right away before they make a huge decision. And so, for me, the spirit of me with regard to development is always like, how can we get a win-win? I'm always reticent to accept a list that only comes from a staff side or only comes from a developer side. I really like when there's, a real good conversation. And so I would not want to vote on this list, not knowing, from both sides.
Same answer for us. If I could interrupt you, Commissioner McLeod, in between.
Yeah, just to speak to that, Commissioner Madden, when we met with Mr. Fear and Mr. Bunch, it was proposed that there would be this list of prohibited uses. So it was not staff who initially presented that as an option. That was part of kind of accepting what was being requested here. And again, we were just accepting of what was being proposed from the other party, the development side.
Then go ahead, Commissioner McLeod, and I'll have a question following yours.
It was a similar question and comment as Commissioner Madden's. I was just curious the process for the list and the types of development that were listed there. It was a little hard for me to sort of wrap my hands around that just here late yesterday to figure out how we came up with that. Would we be in a situation where we look back and say, well, we wish we hadn't have done that? It seemed different from some of the agreements and amendments we've approved in the past. So I was just curious for the background on it, how we suggested those specific types of development. But I think I'm hearing a little bit more, but still I'm not 100% clear on it, or if we would be in a position to vote on Monday. If Mr. Fear, if you're saying the developer, they're still, we don't know how they feel about this list. So it seems a little fast to me.
Yeah, there are 3 parties involved. There's the city, Lake Wire Development, and then the possible ultimate developer. And I know the city and Lake Wire Development have had discussions on the list. Chris, I think it was Tuesday that we met on this issue. It was earlier this week. So we are moving fast.
Monday. It was Monday.
Okay. So we're moving fast to try to facilitate this. Recognize that we may very well have to pull this from the agenda on Monday if it doesn't get resolved. But once again, we thought it was better to have it teed up to go if at all possible. You've heard the cliche "time kills deals," so we're trying to avoid that if possible. But there has been dialogue between Lake Wire Development and the city on the list, and as Chris indicated, we're dealing with a out-of-state developer as well. So. It's a little bit difficult to have that conversation with 3 parties, but that Chris is dealing with them on the list, so we'll know more on Monday.
I wanted to add the comment that this is a significant national developer who does superbly large projects, and it is a very, very older company. It's been around a long time. They're the kind of people that are the kind of company it would be nice to align with, because in a development like this, even though this is not ours, when we don't sacrifice community development's input in this process, when we make sure that we're bringing in their initial proposal, at least in terms of what could go on the site, is going to be you got to think about this entire Bonnet Springs Park crew that are creating this iconic park across the street. They want this to be a piece of property that augments and helps to support that. They're not going to be willing to sell that to someone that doesn't accomplish that. And whereas it's not apparent to us everything that would be there. What's important is, I think what Commissioner Reed did is a great example of that. What shouldn't be there, what we wouldn't want to have included. But I suspect the things we wouldn't want to have included, that's going to not only be true of the developer, it's going to be true of the Bonnet Springs group as well. And certainly our community development department has the ability to keep that intact. And then I saw Commissioner Reed, or Commissioner Walker. Yes.
Well, I'm trying to make sure I can wrap my head around, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If it's put on the agenda, it was purpose for a reason. And I'm trying to make sure I understand the reasoning behind it. If the developer, along with the Lake Wire conglomerate, BSP, as I would call it, if they're in agreement and found it to be of a point to make sure we move forward with it, I'm trying to understand why there may be some kickback. Is it kickback from us, or is it kickback from BSP? Because it was on the agenda for a purpose.
Mr. Fair.
The list was not in a final form until late yesterday afternoon. We forwarded it to the prospective developer. They've got a lot of projects that they're working on. They have not had a chance to really digest what's on the list. We're hoping that between now and the time of the City Commission meeting on Monday, they can become comfortable with what's on that list. And I'm very appreciative of how much time and effort Palmer, City Attorney Davis has put in facilitating, coordinating, cooperating with this amendment. The amendment is very, very important because of the provision in the contract that we're asking to be removed. It is making our negotiations with this prospective developer very, very complicated. We do not want there to be any possibility of these two properties, both the one that is going to be acquired from the city and the existing former Florida Tile site, to be acquired and developed separately. We want it to be as one package. And the way, because of the condition in the contract with the city now, there's the likelihood or the possibility, and that is being specified in our negotiations, that what if this, what if that, and therefore they are uncomfortable with that provision. We're asking that provision be removed, and we have accepted the fact that the city will want to have some prohibited uses, and we're okay with what's on that list now, but we need a little bit of time, and hopefully by Monday afternoon, by the time of the City Commission meeting, the prospective purchaser will be more comfortable with that list. So that's the reason. And we've been negotiating this contract for months, basically, going back and forth. And the complications mostly have been related to the fact of the possibility of the properties being acquired separately. We don't want that to happen.
Thank you for the clarification. And I want to make sure I was understanding and hearing the movement that I hear from you, representing, of course, BSP, as I again call it for short term. And having that kind of information helps me to understand then why we got it here on the agenda at this point. So thank you.
If I could make one other point, Bonnet Springs Park Inc. is a nonprofit corporation that has two subsidiaries. One is Roundhouse Holdings LLC, which is developing the Bonnet Springs Park. The other is Lakewire Development Company LLC, that is the owner of the former Florida Tile site. The entire proceeds from the sale of the Lakewire property, and then ultimately the city of Lakeland parcel that Lakewire will purchase from the city, the proceeds are going to go towards the park to cover the cost of long-term maintenance.
Thank you for the
Everybody wants that optimized, right? Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Chris, so you don't have a contract as of today?
No, we're negotiating. We're very close. We have, I mean, there's some points that mostly timing that we're dealing with, but we're very close. Price has never been an issue. You know, there are dates that we're working with. We want to push them up. They want more time. You know, that sort of thing. These kind of projects, they've got to figure out what can they put on there. We've seen a preliminary plan for what they want to have in phase one, but it's going to be a process. But we are, I'd say, probably 90% there in terms of being able to sign a contract.
Okay, that was the first question. Obviously, within their contract, there's going to be a lengthy due diligence process, as long as contingencies and review plans, etc., that would go with your approval. And then obviously, if we don't relinquish our rights, that it would ultimately come to the city of some sort. That was my idea. I wanted to find out the sense of urgency for Monday versus 2 weeks from now type thing. I'm kind of in concert with Chad and Stephanie that I haven't read the restrictions for C6 right off. I don't recall them. I've read them many times in the past, but I don't know what they say right now, much less how they orchestrate with the restrictions that Palmer lifted and y'all brought forth. And I don't know if I can comprehend them by Monday. I don't want to stifle, I don't want to tie your hands behind your back. I know there's going to be some lengthy process to begin with, and whatever you do, I know it's going to be, we want the same thing that you want. Bonnet Springs to move forward, quality development as a key component to one of the keys to our entryways to our city. And I'm just it's a lot of trust got to be done. And of course, I think if the city I'm willing to work with you guys, and I think our other commissioners are, any way we can to facilitate this. But I don't want to give you a carte blanche per se to do whatever you want to do. And I've just figured out how to do that in a timely manner that will make your developer comfortable with us, and at the same time, but maybe you can address that sense of urgency for Monday per se.
This is David Bunch. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed, by the way, thank you for this opportunity to discuss this. And also thank you for the 4-year partnership we've had to date on this piece of property with the city. It's been a great run, and you all have cooperated, and we've just brought this very difficult site to a point that we're at now that it is marketable. It's clean, it's remediated, it's zoned. Everything that in 26,000 tons of concrete are gone. So it's been a full-time situation to get it to this point, and we're very happy to have the Carter people. One of the reasons we went for the C6 zoning on this property, and Teresa can weigh in anywhere. The city gave us permission to include this city piece in that C6 zoning. We selected the C6 zoning because it allowed for the kind of development we want to do, a mixed use, urban, pedestrian-oriented process. Bonnet Springs Park Board of Directors is totally committed to not wasting this 25 acres of urban land. It's a miracle that we have. So we are very concerned. So when we started working with Carter, we had some options. We can put a whole lot of deed restrictions on this property that involves having to have a post-closing committee that's always ready to deal with an owners association type thing, enforcing a bunch of restrictions. And the developers don't like that. They've got multiple projects, so they want as simple a deal as they can get. So we selected the C6, and we, instead of a big set of restrictions, we just said to them, you got to develop this property to the C6 zoning in effect at the time we close. And we are very comfortable with that as far as protected uses. Then on top of that, we said, and by the way, here are several things we want to add to what you cannot do on this site. You cannot put an adult store. You cannot put mini warehouses. You cannot put a big box facility on this. That's not what we want. And some others that we put on top of the C6 zoning. So that C6 zoning is an excellent classification for this or any property in the downtown area. So, Bill, I just want you to be comfortable. If I can say something to make you more comfortable, that C6 protects the city, protects us. Bonnet Springs Park is comfortable with those restrictions, those uses, and the uses you can't do, things you can't do. So, time-wise, this has been going on. We began the process with Carter in October. We began the negotiations of the contract in December. We're now 2 months, and we're all working in a COVID situation where there's unknowns about the retail market and the hotel market, and there's so many unknowns. What we're trying to do in this effort is, without giving up protection to you or to us, because we have equal interest in what's going on this piece of property, the city and us, or what will not go on it. So what we want to do is kind of clear as many things off the table. You would not believe how many issues we're dealing with on this former industrial site, contaminated, now remediated, for a full 4-year period and a cost of well over $1 million to bring it to this point. So after 2 months of negotiations and with all the factors we're dealing with politically and socially and everywise, time is a killer. Another 2 weeks, yeah, that's not long, but there's been 2 week and 2 week and 2 week to get to this point. And so what we did when we said, please remove this restriction or this requirement for the city to approve the development plan. And by the way, that's not a permitted plan. It's just a concept plan. Let's give the city back some protection here. And so at the meeting Monday, after a couple of hours, I think Palmer said, we talked about the restrictions we were going to put on it. And he said, maybe we need to get the planning department to weigh in here and let's get their ideas on what they don't want to see. So that's when the list was born. And then for the rest of the week, we've been going back and forth on issues such as removed from being able to be put on this. A permitted use was pharmacies and drugstores. And so we said, well, that could be problematic. We've got a developer who is dealing in a COVID-related retail market. They don't want to lose too many opportunities. And that was one we felt like, should a grocery store go here? And then we had a conversation, and Teresa explained to us that was on there because there was some connection to that with, what's the term I'm looking for? The medical marijuana dispensaries. And then upon further checking, that resolved itself. That became a conditional use, and so it went away. So we just took each one and discussed it. Can we do this one here? Is why we are asking for this. And it worked out to something that both the city and we were, as far as Lake Wire, are happy with. But we still have to get And I think it'll be a fairly quick study by Carter. But we want the city to feel comfortable, and you may be, in some senses, more protected this way than you were simply accepting a conceptual plan that could change. So that's kind of the background and the rationale of that list and why 2 weeks is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sutherland.
What I'm concerned about is the city commission sending a message to a developer when it's obviously very sensitive right now, a sensitive point in the dealings with this developer. And for us to send as a body a message to the developer, well, now the city commission is involved and it wants 2 more weeks, I think we're endangering what is very important, that the staff and the developer work together without our interference. So I would urge the commission to allow this to go forward. I think the city attorney will surely come back to us Monday afternoon and say we're not ready yet. But there's a reason the city commission stays out of these things until the staff and the applicant come to them with a potential solution. So I would urge us to let this move forward. Thank you.
I'd echo that, Commissioner Selledge, because I think we don't give up anything in the process, and that's what's really important to me. We have a system. What we're really saying is, yeah, we'll take out a level of complication. If that's what bothers you, let's get the deal done. And doing it with somebody who has a lot of criterion. City Manager Strauss and then Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to point out to the commission, just so it's not lost, that under the previous development agreement on this property, the city commission would have needed to approve the development plan on the property. And so by this request, that would be removed. And instead it would be basically, by right based on the designations, but the developers, and work suggested that in order for the commission and the community to have comfort in what would go there under the C1, they suggested the list of some of the prohibited uses, and then during the meeting there was a discussion about, well, okay, based on what we're hearing on those, let's look and see if there are any other uses that would be similar to the ones that we heard, and that's how then we developed the list. But it has been quick, but it's been a positive working relationship between, staff and the developers, Mr. Bunch and Mr. Fear, that we've been working with. So I just want to point out that you would lose under the development agreement that was previous, you would lose the ability to then approve the development plan. But through this request, there's also then those, assurances based on the uses that would be prohibited.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that clarification, City Manager Strauss. So I guess I want to just clarify my intent to reaching out to Mr. Fear was not to impede a process or add 2 weeks. There's always, in negotiations like this where, we can't wreck the deal by giving too much information, and yet there's always the speed of trust factor. If we knew what the pictures looked like and what was being presented to you as the potential development, we could either be super excited or worried. But, the person in the middle is obviously, the Bonnet Springs Park, who not only wants the initial sale to be able to create some revenue, which is, I'm sure, really needed with mitigation now on the lake after they've done all of this remediation on the Lake Ware property. So, but then the second thing is, of course, to have a neighbor that works in context and is synergistic with the park. So an urban, pedestrian friendly thing is what I heard. It said, that is what they're looking for. So, I can appreciate that staff and City Attorney Davis have quickly, tried to put together this list. I think my colleague, Commissioner Reed and Commissioner McLeod and I were just looking at things like bed and breakfast. Could that be misconstrued that, is that a specific clarification that doesn't mean a hotel? And looking at a childcare, what if there's a office building, that like Publix that has a childcare facility? Or it just seemed like there's a lot of small details that could have nuances that would give a potential developer pause. In my mind, I'm thinking developers are looking at things, like Lakeside Village and urban pedestrian friendly areas, and are looking at the market and what's really attractive and where people want to live, work, and play, and wanting to integrate those things that make sense. And, how would I know as a commissioner if, a daycare center or a vocational training center, I think at Lakeside Village, we have, is it Kaiser or one of the, colleges has is able to rent to their space to that. Would this preclude them from that? So, my point was to be sensitive to the negotiations with the developer, not knowing who the developer is, but trusting that Bonnet Springs Parks wants someone that not only gives them the money they need from the property sale, but also, is meeting a good neighbor, that works synergistically with the park. So my only reticence is to add on all of these extra prohibited uses, not to slow the process.
Good, Commissioner McCarley.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Fear, for clarifying earlier the differences between Bonnet Springs and the Lakewire partnership, and then the other partnership that you have, because I think those are three separate entities. Yes, Bonnet Springs is interested in this as a good neighbor and obviously has a tie to it. However, this is still a kind of a developer working with another developer when you look at the Lakewire partnership. So keeping those kind of separate, I think, is really important to understand. There are three separate entities here. But I just want to echo Commissioner Selvage and what he said with regard to not getting in the way of the process. I think it's really important. This is why we have subject matter experts on staff who work with developers and look at the different zonings that we have around the city and the community. And so I would like us to go ahead and move forward with this on Monday. And also with the realization that, just like we've done in other instances around the city of Lakeland, if there is something that pops up and is a red flag, we still have efforts in place through our planning and development process that will catch those, and zoning. And people can come back and request, because we've done that in the past, especially recently with different properties around town. So this is a multi-step process. I don't want us to be in the way of the first step of this, and making sure that time is of the essence for the developer. And I would venture to guess, and I'm making an assumption, but that the Lakewire Properties Group is extraordinarily painstakingly privy to what this developer wants to do, and that it works in concert with the area. So I think that I feel, very good about moving forward with this, knowing that there are other parameters down the road that could help us if we run into a problem or a red flag. But I do think the commission needs to probably step back and allow staff and the developer to work together.
Mr. Madden.
Yes, and I would just, one more point of clarification is I'm going to be looking heavily towards Mr. Fear, knowing that the developer's having to grapple with these conditions at a last minute, and not to, like I said, impede the process or extend the process, but to make sure if there's any requests that they have that are on this list that seem onerous or something that they're not, just like when we were dealing with, a medical facility who wanted to maybe add an extra drive-through, I wanted to make sure that that perspective was heard from the developer, because they do know the market and what the market requires. And I don't want them to feel shy about asking right here, right now, before we vote, on some of these parameters that will dictate how they can develop the property. So this is their chance, to reach out to say, listen, we are not happy with the daycare aspect or with the bed and breakfast aspect. So that, again, I'm clarifying my point, and I'm reaching out to the developer group to say, if there are things over the weekend that you don't like about this list, we want to hear about them on Monday before we vote.
Any other comments? Great discussion. Mr. Fear.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Madden. Those are exactly the questions that the developer is going to want to address. What does it mean, bed and breakfast? And would it be important to be able to have a daycare aspect in a apartment complex. And so they may very well want to address that and make some tweaks to that list. And we certainly will address that with City Attorney Davis before the meeting. Hopefully we'll be able to get any of those issues clarified and be able to tweak that list.
Commissioner Mann, or are you just saying A-okay? A-okay. All right, then I sense from what I have listened to that you do want to keep this amendment on for Monday, correct? As a whole, let's thumbs up if you're on that or whatever. Okay. And Commissioner Reed, I think you had something else you wanted to say too.
Thank you. Teresa, can you provide us with a list on C6?
Yes, sir. I'm actually in the process now of highlighting that list and everything that's allowed within it.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll get that over to the city manager to distribute to you.
Commissioner McLeod. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, everyone. I know we've talked about this a lot, so I'll try to be brief, but I think for me, it's just, this is different than some of the typical arrangements that, at least in my time on the commission. So just trying to figure out the details. I know it's been very helpful to hear the discussions, the negotiations, the things that have taken place over the past month. And so for many of the players, this has been ongoing for a long time. For some of us, when you're hearing about it for the first time, just trying to make sure that we understand what we're doing and the ramifications of that, and making sure, I think we all have the same interest in making sure these properties are successful or an asset and fit with the Bonnet Springs vision. And so, yeah, I'm supportive of moving it forward to Monday, just I'm glad we've spent some time talking about what this means, because it is different than many of the, zoning and development issues that we've discussed, recently.
I appreciate that comment from you, Commissioner McLeod, because we work diligently not to do anything that's ramming through too fast or feels like railroading in any portion of a process. And when there's something that becomes time sensitive, that there's probably pretty strong reasons on negotiating basis for those kinds of things when they do occur. And so making certain we don't forfeit the ability to control, recognizing we're working with a developer who's already invested $1 million in remediation of a property, and I forget how many tons, but 26,000 tons of concrete, some number like that have been crushed and removed to get a lot ready, and then finding somebody who can do and take the whole piece as a single buyer and develop it in a very phased and controllable way that has a history of developing wonderful projects on a national basis. Those are all good things to line up. And knowing we haven't forfeited anything on the community development side. And so becomes understandable why they're going to say, because they don't know us, why they're going to I don't know who we're working with in this line. Get those guys out of here so we can work with the people that we're typically trying to work with. And so having that, I think we all share the same emotions you've just shared, Commissioner McLeod. And so having Monday, having a chance to think about it some more, recognizing all the parameters we've discussed in this, line it up to be something that hopefully we will be comfortable making a decision at that time. Any other comments by commissioners? Commissioner or City Manager Strauss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But, because the public is watching and the commission and everyone on the call, I just want to address before we move on Commissioner Walker's questions about Club Kathleen. There is no active business tax receipt at that location that we have. And we're not aware of any redevelopment plan there at all. However, there is an active code enforcement case, and we do have permits for roofing and fencing, which is probably a part of the code enforcement case. And so that is what we know that is happening at that site. If there's any other, potential redevelopment coming, we're just not aware of that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Strauss, for a quick answer. I appreciate that.
Anything else on this item? All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Fear, Mr. Bunch, thank you for both being available to answer some of those questions. All right, that takes us to we're done, doesn't it? We are going to break. Make sure we're done. Let's flip my page over. Yes, we're going to break before we go to the city attorney workshop, and it's 10:35. Let's come back at 10:45, please. We are adjourned.